Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at the Adventures of Luther Arkwright, number 1 through 4. This was a 9-issue miniseries published by Dark Horse Comics in 1990. And of course, the next episode I will look at number 5 through 9 and finish off the series. This is actually our first 4-parter, because after this, there was a mini-series called Luther Arkwright, A Heart of Empire, and I'm going to do that one too. I'm going to do all 4 in a row. And Luther Arkwright has a very strange history. Its writer, artist, its creator, Bryan Talbot, the great British cartoonist, he did a little short story for a fanzine in England, probably the mid-70s, maybe 76, 77. And it was just kind of a character named Luther Arkwright, but it was kind of a goofy, silly little story, kind of a satire of Jerry Cornelius, Michael Moorcock's character. But then, when the ground level English publication Near Myths began publication, he had a 5-part serial of Luther Arkwright. And that's what's reprinted in here. Plus, in, I believe, the early 80s, this magazine called Psst, like the sound effect, they published another 5-part serial. And so this is all included in here. Plus, he finished off the story like 6 years later, in 1987, 1988. So it has a very bizarre history, Luther Arkwright. This story, this 9-issue miniseries, comprises over 10 years of art and story. Well, maybe a little less, around 10 years. So it's a fantastic piece of work. It's amazing that from such humble beginnings, and Bryan Talbot was a very young cartoonist at the time. He was just starting out. I wouldn't be surprised if he was still a teenager. And but from the very beginning, he had this all planned out. It's very accomplished, the art and the writing from the get-go. And remember, this is the late 70s. This is before, Alan Moore and, the British wave of writers. And so, I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. And even though it retains its Jerry Cornelius-like kind of inspiration, even Michael Moorcock says, oh, it's not a copy of Jerry Cornelius, And, of course, Bryan Talbot agrees with that assessment as well, because he doesn't want it to be. He wants it to be its own thing. So let's get started. This is very ahead of its time, this comic. So here's number 1. And all the covers are new for this Dark Horse miniseries by Bryan Talbot. And they're pretty nice. We have an introduction by Alan Moore in 1987. He wrote this. He's basically saying what I just said, how he was way ahead of the curve. Bryan Talbot was definitely ahead of the game here, and doing much more complex storytelling and all kinds of narrative techniques. He was doing that stuff before anyone, even before Alan Moore. So here we have each issue has a nice little title page. And as you can see already, Bryan Talbot, just a fantastic illustrator in like the old world, old school sense of the word. I mean, man, this guy illustrates the shit out of this. We have a little quote from J.R. Montpellier, the archaeologist. He's a character in the story. To be honest, I don't know if he's real. I'm too lazy to look it up. I don't know if Bryan Talbot just made him up, but I think he was a real archaeologist, because this narrative incorporates real people and, imaginary characters, almost like, what's his face, Robert Anton Wilson, where you kind of get confused as like, wait, is this a real character from history that he's talking about? Here's like a sense of the writing and a present day, a Hyde Park and Albert Memorial, a product of Victoria's death fetish or determination to perpetuate the prince consort's memory or deepest love, or all three, or none. It depends upon location, which variation, which alternative, which parallel. The reason I read this is because it kind of sums up that this is all about like alternate realities. Luther Arkwright has the ability, he's the only person who has the ability to travel between all the alternate dimensions and all the variant dimensions. And so we start off, we see him in Hyde Park, or a Hyde Park, because this is just one of many dimensions versions of Hyde Park. His kid gives him a message, and it's a note from Rose Wilde, who we will soon meet. She says, "Meet me at the Crystal Palace by the Bayou Tapestry." We see these two shady guys who are obviously surveilling Rose, and we don't know what they're up to just yet. Now we see almost all these scene changes. They'll tell us like the date, but they'll also tell us which dimension it is. So I didn't point that out. In the first one, this is para 003856. So this is a version of reality where the British Empire, like in our reality, existed. 0000 here, this is like the central reality. This is like Earth 1 in DC Comics. And they're basically like the heroes of the story. And Luther works for them. He's an agent. So is Rose Wilde. Basically, in all the dimensions, 00000 is the only dimension to get their shit together. It's a unified, peaceful world. And because of that, they realize there's all these other dimensions that are chaos. Some of them are rubble. Some of them, Earth is completely destroyed, or it's an irradiated husk of a planet. So they're almost like, they've perfected their world, so they're almost like trying to help all the other dimensions. They have this like interdimensional police force type thing. So now we cut back to this England, and Rose meets Luther, and these two agents make their move, these two skulking characters. I love this guy's character design here. You can see it over here better. He's almost like Mort from the Bazooka Joe comics. And they pull out a napalm pistol and they fire. We find out now that Luther Arkwright not only can travel between dimensions, but he has psychic powers. So he's the most effective agent that this police force has. He kills the two bad guys, but they set the Crystal Palace on fire, burning up the Bayou Tapestry, killing a lot of innocent people who were hanging out. But Luther and Rose escape. Later on, back at her place, it looks like they have just had sex. Tantric sex, of course. Because Luther Arkwright's into all this kind of esoteric spirituality type, crazy stuff. And she's got a telescreen in her apartment that he can communicate with the 00 reality, his overlords. And they tell him, "We need you back here immediately." And Rose says bye. And I like how she says, "Destiny calls, Luther. Never mind. You'll see one of me soon." Because basically in many dimensions, he knows Rose Wilde. They're all a little different. Rose Wilde doesn't have a power as special as Luther's, but she does have the power to at least kind of have a mind meld with her other alternate personas. So she can get knowledge from the Rose Wilde from another dimension or from many dimensions, which is, of course, very helpful. There's also, we see the nonlinear nature of the story, where he just starts thinking all these images. And remember, this is a young artist just starting his first serial. It is serialized, right? Over a few years. And yet he's got it all planned out. This kind of a bizarre thought he has. He's just thinking of all these various things. A sudden realization. They've activated the fire opal. Flashback to 1913. The discovery of the Fire Frost Codex. Then a duel. 1975, an Octobriana in the shade of the Sphinx. 10 minutes ago, tantric lovemaking, hot on the furs. We're going to see all of those things. He had this all planned out. Even though, there was probably months in between each issue of Near Myths. But he already had it all planned out. So now we really get to see the nonlinear nature of this first issue especially. All of a sudden, we're in 1913. And we see that Montpellier guy, the archaeologist who was quoted on the inside front cover. You can see that Bryan Talbot's art is, it's pretty amazing. But it's still, not the Bryan Talbot of a few years later. But it's still, look at this illustration. I mean, he's going to town. I heard in an interview where he wanted this not to be a typical comic. He really wanted this to be like a graphic novel for adults. And he, one of the things he did, if you notice, there's no sound effects in this comic. This was originally, didn't even have word balloons. Dark Horse changed it and got a letterer to make word balloons so it read more like a normal comic. And also, he wanted it to draw it in an amazingly illustrated style, unlike, most comics at the time were kind of simplified, Sal Buscema, guys like that. He was like, no, I want it to look like William Hogarth and, these great illustrators from the past. A lot of work is put into these pages, and it gets more and more dense as he continues. So Montpellier is describing in his journal this dig he's on, and it's in Heliopolis, Egypt. And he finds the Fire Frost Codex, which Luther just thought of in a different time, in a different dimension. As if you weren't confused enough, now we totally cut away to this kind of flashback interlude, almost talking about how the first time Luther ever zapped across dimensions. And he ends up in this dimension that he knows is his birth dimension, but he's been away, I guess. It's almost like he has amnesia. So he goes to a library and he reads the whole encyclopedia just so he can know this universe and what the hell's going on. He needs to know its history, its social mores, so he can survive in it. And he basically is just a bum. He wanders around stealing food and just meditating. And then he finds an article about his father, who died in, I believe, 1950. His father was a World War II air ace. But after the war, he died in a fire. Very mysterious. We see Luther meditating. I do want to comment, the one thing I don't like about this comic for the most part is his stupid haircut. I hate his haircut so much. I don't know where that haircut came from. I don't think anyone in history has ever had such a dumb haircut. Okay, that's silly, but I'm sorry, it really was bugging me. And so now we are back to 00 London. And Luther is, this is a different Rose Wild. She's wearing this little helmet, but it's interesting. She has vestigial memories of making love to him the night before on a bear rug or on furs. So that's how she can, get experiences and memories from her other selves. It's a very fleeting thing. It's almost like remembering a dream for her, for the most part. And so basically we find out from this discussion that there's the villains in this piece. Those two guys who try to incinerate them in the Crystal Palace. They're called disruptors. And there's basically just these evil guys who want to fuck up all the multiverse. Even they, have no clue why. They're even saying, what, do they just want to destroy everything? I don't get it. So basically they're in possession, or about to be in possession, of this basically cosmic weapon that could destroy every dimension. And then he has a thought about his grandfather who died in the First World War. I'm sorry. Oh, here it is. More of this kind of nonlinear thinking here. Like he's making love to Rose, and then somehow he's thinking about his grandfather. And then we cut away to his grandfather. This really has nothing to do with the plot. And then we cut back to the Bayeux Tapestry, a meeting at the Crystal Palace. And now we actually see their tantric love. And now we're back at the briefing. And so basically, this cosmic weapon is called the fire opal. And I guess the dimension of its origin, they somehow know it's 007287. Now, this is a dimension where Cromwell never lost power. And so in modern times, all of his descendants have become the Lord Protectorate. So there's another Cromwell is running England, and it's a fascist theocracy. And Luther has been to this dimension before. He has contacts. So they're going to send him there. They figure this dimension, because it's the birth dimension of the fire opal, they're going to send him there, and they're going to actually cause a war, because that'll force the disruptors to come out of hiding, and they're going to go to that dimension to, clean things up, and then they can follow them back to their home dimension and take the war to the disruptors. It's very complicated, guys. I hope I'm making sense. I think I got the gist of it, but it's very confusing. I had to read this issue like twice. And that's what makes it so great. It's so dense. And at the end of the day, at the end of the issue, everything connects. He really thought this out. It reminds me of Alan Moore in that sense, of just the amazing facility with the mechanics of storytelling. Really thinking things through, like a clockmaker. Here's what the disruptors look like. This is interesting too. Disruptors wear this on purpose. They basically want to terrify the peasants, as he puts it. And, they appear in all these dimensions. And they're basically mythological quasi-men imprinted on race memory, passed down in the forms of legend and folklore. Giants, ogres, demons, creatures of the night, UFOs, ghosts. So all the beasties and, boogeymen and werewolves in all the dimensions and all the folklore, it's all really these guys. And they like it that way. Now we keep hopping back to World War I. And now we see his father get killed. He's in a trench. All these captions, I can't describe all of them to you, but they're all really well written. And very just like stream of consciousness. It seems like that. But it all actually refers to other things. Some which we won't see for 2 issues. So that's the plan. It's rare for them to start aggression, but they figure they have to do this to save the multiverse. And so now we see a flashback. I believe this is another dimension. And I'm sorry, before we get to there, we see Luther preparing for his journey to the other dimension, taking certain weapons, currencies, getting anti-rabies shots. Just like when you go to another country, you gotta get shots and stuff. God, that haircut pisses me off. I gotta get over that, sorry. And then we see this flashback in another dimension. It's at London. Maybe it's the same London we saw in the first one. I'm gonna check it, sorry. No, it's not. It's a totally different London. And he's having a duel with this guy. And if you guys notice too, the storytelling changes throughout this. It's a kind of amazing how each page, scene by scene, he'll give it a totally different layout from another scene. So this one's way more open than what we've just been seeing with all the black backgrounds. And so this duel happens, and Luther kills the guy and blows out half of his guts. And the guy says, "The bastards, they lied. I was supposed to win. They were going to distract you." And Luther said, "Yeah, they tried, but I overcame it with my psychic powers." And, this is what happens to all you pawns of the disruptors. So he's a human guy, but he's a pawn of the disruptors. They probably offered him power or money or something. And with his psychic powers, it gives him a little nudge. He figures, oh, this is valuable. While this guy's dying, and the fact that he knows the disruptors betrayed him, his masters, he might cough up all this information. And so this is a flashback showing how let's call them the dimensional cops from 00. This is how they found out where the fire opal, what dimension it's from. And this is the dimension Luther's about to go to. That's where the action's going to happen. Turns out the seconds are disruptors as well. Luther dispatches them. And now we see another flashback. I kind of like this. It almost looks like a comic strip. A daily comic strip is thrown in here. And this is a flashback. Luther heads to, I believe, Tibet. And very much like, Lost Horizon, he finds this monastery. It almost seems like a mirage. When he goes inside, it's all warm, even though it's it's below freezing in the mountains. And for a year, he learns his psychic powers. And from the five, they're called, these monks. God, that's some well-drawn faces there. We see him learning all of his crazy hoodoo. And eventually, though, he hears that there's black-garbed strangers in the villages below. So he knows the disruptors are on his tail. He doesn't want to bring harm to the monastery, so he leaves. Regrettably, he leaves, and he returns to England. So that's a lot to take in. And it's, some review on the internet said something to the effect of like, yeah, he just keeps throwing this stuff at you, and he's just like, doesn't really care if you get it or not. He's going to keep going with his story. And you get that sense. He's just like, come on, step up, reader. He's not going to hold your hand. This is a nice little thing by Bryan Talbot, just telling you the whole publishing history of Luther Arkwright, kind of what I told you at the beginning of this video. And I believe that's it for this issue. Now we got number 2. And this is, we're going to get to meet a special guest star here. I'm sorry. I grabbed the wrong one. Here we go. Number 2. Another cool cover. His hair looks better here because the wind is blowing it out of that stupid coif. That's a nice drawing there. Another title page. Sometimes this art reminds me of those like classic, like pre 2000 AD artists. The ones who drew for like the war comics and the sports comics. I can't think of any of their names now. So now he has landed in this dimension where this epic battle is going to take place. I just love this storytelling. This kind of stuff wasn't done much back then. I mean, it's very, Storenko Galassi, and even Dave Sim would do stuff like this. But, under the influence of those type guys. Barry Windsor Smith. And so it gets a little more linear, this part of the comic, or this part of the series, but it's still pretty damn complex. So in this alternate reality, the major powers in Europe are the Russian Empire and the Prussian Empire. And we see the Prussians, they've got these giant flying dreadnoughts, kind of like the Shield helicarrier. And I guess they're heading to Russia. And we'll find out soon. So Luther is talking to the Tsar. I believe this is the Tsar. And so I guess he's befriended him before on other visits to the dimension. Luther, in this dimension, it seems like Luther Arkwright's totally respected by both sides. I don't know, I guess he's a diplomat or something? And they're talking about, we find out that basically there's still royalists in England. They're underground, obviously, because, Cromwell has run England for, 300 years at this point. But there's still like a king. The bloodline is still there, and there's still rebels who want to reinstate the monarchy. And I guess the Russians, with the help of the Prussians, are going to help that revolution happen. So the Prussian leader is Archduke Wilhelm, and he's heading there for a big diplomatic powwow. So apparently this fire opal is already wreaking havoc. There's little things throughout the dimensions. Nightmares increasing, suicides, cases of insanity. So it's starting with little things like that. Freak weather patterns. And it's just going to increase exponentially. So we realize that they gotta hurry. The multiverse is in crisis. You could almost say it's a crisis of infinite Earths if you want to. So the Prussian, the titular head is this guy's grandfather, the Kaiser. But, he's pretty sick. So his grandson, this guy, I think this is Wilhelm, he pretty much runs things. So here's this big treaty going on. And it's the Prussians and the Russians signing a peace treaty. And they're also both going to help out with this English situation. Of course, we find out it's not to be nice. I think it's the Prussians are planning to take over England for themselves. And so here, Luther goes to the Jewish part of town, and he's looking for a contact. And it's Octobriana. She just jumps on him. And the whole time she's just all like, "We have sex now?" He's like, "No, we gotta talk business." So I don't know if you guys know about Octobriana, but it's a weird story. It's hard to believe it's true. Octobriana was basically a hoax. In the late 60s, I believe, maybe 1970, some guy from Czechoslovakia, an expat who escaped the communist bloc, he basically made this book talking about this comic book hero, this underground comic book from Russia, Octobriana. And they were censored, of course. And she's basically this character. Just this total, like, rock and roll, sexy, almost like a Russ Meyer, Faster Pussycat character. Total kick-ass hero. Runs around half naked. And it turns out it was all a hoax. There weren't any Russian comics of Octobriana. But it entered the collective unconscious. People bought this book in the West. They just assumed it was real. And so Octobriana is almost like in the public domain. It was meant to be. Jim Rugg did a whole graphic novel about her. She pops up in comics here and there. Sometimes she pops up in movies. And so Bryan Talbot just said, "I'm going to have Octobriana." So it's kind of like getting the superstar comic character, who's not really, though, is a fake one. But she's the guest star, and she's Luther's sidekick in this. There's some disruptors, of course, at this treaty, this meeting. They try to take out the Russian leader, the Tsar, and Luther takes him out. Later on, he does end up having sex with Octobriana, of course. Luther is just like James Bond in this. He's just, every woman he meets, he has sex with. Now we have another flashback. So, back in England, and guys, look at the style here. This total, like, almost like black and white painting style. Really sharp looking. And, you know, the earlier ones were like in the style, but it seems like he's getting better already. This whole series, you can see the improvement, because he's a young man when he starts, his first long comic. And every issue he gets better and better. And of course, there's years in between some of the issues, so it makes sense. He goes to this Christian monastery in Sussex. They don't want him there, but he uses his psychic powers to mind nudge the guy and say, "You're letting me stay here." So he ends up staying there, hiding out. He knows the disruptors are after him. So he basically just spends his time meditating, a total thought process shutdown, because these disruptors can follow him, track him down through his mental and psychic activity. So he can like basically shut his brain down through meditation so they can't find him. But it doesn't work. They do eventually come, and he splits and escapes. So now we're in Egypt, and we're at the Great Pyramid. Octobriana and Luther are there. And they're going to go inside the Great Pyramid because they believe that's where the fire lotus is, this great cosmic weapon. Before they even get inside, though, they see disruptor agents. And they've lasered a hole through the pyramid. Using his psychic powers, he realizes they're going down a dead end. So he's like, we can beat him to the fire opal, because I know where it is. Some really nice art in this sequence here. This tomb with all the dead slaves that were killed to keep the secret of the pyramid. They get inside this chamber, and there it is. The two halves of the fire opal. I didn't mention that. You know, things aren't that bad, but when they get united, then everything's going to shit really quick. And finally, the disruptors, track him down through his mental activity, psychic activity. And now we go back to the flashback sequence. So, young Luther, moves in with these hippies in a communal house. And once again, he just meditates all day, but he also finds out that doing hard drugs can shut down his brain, which I guess makes sense. Also, alcohol and watching television all the time. It's interesting that he says, from watching the news, I could tell this was a world with a strong disruptor influence. It's showing our world, unfortunately. So this horrible world that it has these evil forces controlling everything. It's like, oh, that's us. Beautifully drawn images of famous news historic incidents. Here's another one of those little comic strips. Does that look like a daily strip? Just thrown on top of the page. None of the hippies like him. They can sense that there's something violent about him. He's got this violence in his soul. And they finally say, we're going to kick you out unless you get political. You got to join in the cause or get out. So he goes to a demonstration against Vietnam. And to prove himself, he basically beats the shit out of 9 cops. He's in the newspaper the next day. And the hippies don't like this. Anyway, we see another little comic strip. And then it's to be continued. Here's a little key to that peace treaty sign. God, he really thinks this out. He names every character in here. Some are real, some are made up. But man, that's a lot of work. Most people, it doesn't even matter the story who all these random people are, but he does it. He does the analysis of Octobriana's tarot throw for Luther, which I kind of skimmed over. Okay, that's it for this issue. Now do I got number 3? Yes. And there we see Octobriana again. Looking pretty kick-ass. Another nice front piece here. Another title page. And we finally get to see Cromwell, the Lord Protector. He knows that Luther Arkwright is in his dimension. And I don't even know if he knows he's under disruptor influence, but basically they are. This whole English fascist protectorate is controlled by the disruptors. So now we're back to the dimension where all the shit's going down. I mean, well, we already were there, but now we see the Russian guy again. Sorry, guys. I gotta get rid of this cough. And this is interesting. We see Cromwell again talking to his cabinet. And there's all this weird op art behind them. Later on in this little article, they explain why. Because Cromwell is such a Puritan that the first Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell, he banned all representational art, thinking it's decadent or sinful. And so the only art England has is shitty op art like this. Here it is, more of it. But it's just a fun way for Luther Arkwright to put in some more crazy stuff. But it actually makes sense. Meanwhile, there's going to be a thing in every issue. Little incidences of how all the dimensions are kind of going nuts. UFO sighting epidemic. Squadron of Swiss Lockheed starfighters simultaneously lose control and crash in Geneva. We also see these articles by Hiram Kowalski, a foreign correspondent for the New Amsterdam Herald. So America it's not the United States of America. It's still kind of like a colonial possession of England. But it seems like they're kind of independent. Almost like how Canada was for, a couple centuries. So France and England are strong allies in this world. We see a little glimpse of Luther just like really looking bad. Looking strung out, cold turkey and wandering through the streets, freezing and hungry. So now, look at this. It's just that, then jumping to there, then the Prussians, and then Cromwell. It's just, it's really, like I said, he doesn't hold your hand. You got to read this comic very carefully. So Cromwell's battening down the hatches. He's arresting royalist sympathizers. He's getting ready. He knows his government's under attack. So there's this part of London called the Maze, which is kind of like this just no man's land, where I guess tons of criminals are there, but also royalists are there. It's basically just like the government has written it off. They're like, we can't get everyone. So we'll just have this area where all the kind of the dissidents will hang out. But it's totally enclosed, so they can't infect the rest of the city. But it's the only place you can go to. They have taverns and alcohol and whorehouses. But it also has, it's a political hotbed of dissent. The Maze. So Luther goes into the maze. Man, look at this crazy amount of technical stuff. This is amazing stuff. I was looking at this page for like 3 minutes last night. Look at all these little people. Really nice illustration. You can already see he's like just every page almost. He's getting better and better. Whoa! Look at that. That's quite a change. So it looks like he's totally using airbrush on this. So I'm not even sure what this has to do with the story. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I do. So this is Luther Arkwright is touching both halves of the fire opal. This is a flashback to when he was in the pyramid. And it gives him a vision of its origin. And we see these two warring star systems. These two civilizations who have been fighting each other. So we get this amazingly cool sci-fi art here. And I guess then they made this fire opal, which is also known as fire frost. They made this weapon as a deterrent. It would be such a horrible weapon that it could never be used to hopefully stop the war. And for a little time, it worked. They signed a peace treaty, these two civilizations. Of course, like all deterrents, somebody's going to use it eventually. And someone does. It destroys the whole galaxy. I don't want to turn the page, guys. This is some luscious stuff. Look at that. Meanwhile, we keep interspersing with Octobriana in the pyramid. The disruptors have arrived. And look at the differences in art. It's striking. The two styles. Both of them are beautiful. So this galaxy exploded. The fire opal basically caused a singularity and basically popped into another dimension. Wait, is that what I might have mistipped that? No, I think it just pops into another galaxy. Just like Dreadstar. And it turns out that the galaxy it lands in has our Earth. Well, not our Earth, sorry. The alternate dimension Earth where Cromwell is still running England. And then we get some interspersed. Look at these great kick-ass Octobriana panels. Kicking these guys' asses with her thong. She's killing the disruptors. We see that fire opal land on Earth, primordial Earth. And it buries itself. Well, it splits in two. And then it's buried in the Earth's crust for thousands of years. Millions of years, probably. Just waiting. God, look at this, guys. That's some beautiful stuff. So, Octobriana tries to rescue Luther, and they knock her out. One of the disruptors conks her on the head. When she wakes up, the fire opal's gone. And all the disruptors. So things are about to get a lot worse. Back to the flashbacks. We see that same Luther that we just saw in a kind of almost like a little flash forward. But now it's way better illustrated. Look at this beautiful work. The tone work here and the gray tone and all of it. It's amazing. So this is strung out Luther. He's been kicked out of the communal house. He's jonesing. And he finds a tarot card, and he flings it into the sky, and it seems like the wind takes it all the way into the universe. And he mentions that earlier, a tarot card floating through space. So it's amazing. Even the littlest thing in this is connected. He's at this famous, I believe it's called, is this Hyde Park? Well, it's some kind of cemetery in England. It's a famous one. It's the one where Karl Marx is buried. He's before Karl Marx's statue. And for the first time, he fully manifests his psychic powers. And he blows up. I don't think he intentionally does it. He's just full of anger. And he blows up the Karl Marx gravestone with the bust. And then he runs away. Kind of freaked out at what he did. His psychokinetic powers. Once again, guys, I don't want to turn the page. This is so nice. Here's an article by Trina Robbins about Octobriano, the whole myth and the legend. This looks great, some of this stuff. Trina meets a Russian person who says, you know, we always heard that it was a hoax perpetrated by some cartoonist in San Francisco. But Trina thinks that that's something the Russians tell their people. So it's just a whole, like, it's a very Robert Anton Wilson type story. Where it's like, wait, what is true? What's fake? And Trina does a new illustration just for this article of Octobriano. I believe that's it for this one. And now we got number 4. This is where we're going to finish up today. And another new cover by Talbot. Title page. It's interesting that all the title page illustrations aren't that good compared to the rest of the art. Oh, guys, look at like, all of a sudden he's drawn like this now. I mean, I don't know if this is where the cut was, where he took that break. There was that first 5 in Near Myths, and then there was the stories, the 5 in there. But man, look at this illustration here. So he's in the maze. He meets that guy, Hiram Kowalski from New Amsterdam, the reporter. Cromwell recently kicked out all journalists. So this guy, being an intrepid journalist, he just snuck into the maze so he could keep writing reports for his paper. Man, I would love a comic just about this guy in this world. Some great reporter. Luther meets him and he says, how would you like an interview with the future king, Charles II? We basically want America to side with Charles. We want the colonies to be on our side. So we'd like, you guys to get to know him, basically. They're in this tavern. Look at all these, like, well-drawn faces and characters in here. I like this bartender's face. And he sees someone and he approaches him. It's Harry Fairfax. Now, this is an associate of Luther's. And Harry's the kind of the comic relief of this comic. We see more of these bizarre happenings in the dimensions. Thames floods, disaster. Four oil rigs mysteriously disappear in the North Sea. So Fairfax works for the Royalists. He seems to know everything. He's like a major rebel. All of a sudden, this guy seems to have a seizure in the middle of the bar. Everyone thinks he's possessed by demons. But, Luther knows better. So he kind of performs this psychic exorcism. And everyone actually sees these demons. This is some amazing art. You can totally see how Bryan Talbot, grew up reading underground comics. And he was kind of in semi-underground comics in the mid-70s. Kind of in-between type comics. But the people are seeing all these demons, and it's kind of interesting how Luther Arkwright basically says they're all illusions of the psyche, these demons. And Harry's confused. He says, you saw what you expected to see. Like magical rituals are psychological aids to induce a receptive mental state. Practices to evoke ESP and psi abilities. Almost like saying it's all that stuff is not like magic. It just appears to be so. But just an interesting little interlude, especially just for that panel there. That is amazing. We're back to the Lord Protector. And we see what a horrible person Lord Protector is. One of his dudes, one of his flunkies, he's like, she's ready for you, sir. She's a virgin. She's been deloused. And the Lord Protector basically has this woman tied up, and he has his way with her. But the whole time he's acting like, he says, I do this for your sake, to purge your soul of its blackness. You will quake in the shadow of the divine presence. So he's this total hypocritical piece of shit, you know. Look at this cityscape here. Some more great illustration. Now we see, once again, Luther's meditating. He meditates a lot. The illustration's getting out of hand here, guys. This is just amazing. This could be the era, or after. This could be the 1987, like the finishing up the series. No, I don't think it is. This must be the early 80s stuff, because it's only the 4th issue. But who knows? I don't know. But this reminds me of his amazing detailed work on Nemesis the Warlock. That stuff is crazy. That is like, oh, fuck. Look at this shit. This is like fucking, like Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein portfolio crazy. Which is really just, you know, Joseph Clement Cole, all those amazing illustrators. Gustave Doré. God, that's amazing. Kind of weird, though. It's not even an important moment in the story. I think he just wanted to show off for this page. I love seeing all the various characters in this maze, all the poverty. It's really, you can smell it. You can smell the city. This is so great. Fairfax shows off the printing presses where they make underground newspapers and broadsheets. And we see this one, King and Country, and very tiny here. It says Comics, Cromwell by Hunt Emerson. It's really tiny, but I love that in this alternate dimension. There's a Hunt Emerson who's doing anti-Cromwell cartoons in the paper. So now we get to meet Charles II. This is maybe the next King of England. After a 300-year interruption. We see his wife, who's pregnant. They're very friendly. He's obviously, in his travels, Luther has met Charles before, gotten his trust. It seems like they're old buddies. And basically he's like, I'm here for you, King. We're gonna, the revolution's just right around the corner. We're gonna take over England. Charles too seems to be, I mean, he seems better than Cromwell, but he's a pretty vainglorious, kind of a fop. It's not like he'd be a great ruler. He'd be better than Cromwell, though. He seems like a nice enough guy, though. So Cromwell finally says, okay, we found out enough information. It's time to pull the string. And he sends his elite motorcycle guard. They're like the SS. He sends them into the maze. He said, enough of this shit. Take them out. And we get some more things from that reporter. We see him checking out the motorcycle guys. And so Luther, with his psychic powers, knows they're coming. He says, King, Princess, go get into the tunnels. You got to get out of here. And Charles refuses. He says, I'm going to fight with my men. But Luther nudges him with his mind. So he leaves. And you can see that homage to that famous illustration from I believe, the late 1800s, where it makes a skull. It's a little forced. Not really, actually. It's pretty clever. I guess this is the arch into the tunnels. There's the cobblestones of the steps. There's so many references in this, written-wise and art-wise. He just packs it full of so much stuff. So, the battle begins, and Cromwell's bastards start killing everyone, blowing shit up. The whole time, these incidences throughout the dimensions are getting more and more important. They're not just people having nightmares. It's like U.S. and China declare war on Russia. Mount Etna explodes. I love some of these this kind of panel stuff. So Luther's taking them out. Here's a nice little panorama or series of panels of just all the carnage happening. And the whole time Luther's just taking out guys one by one, calmly. And then we see the king and the princess. She gives them a look with this twinkling in her eyes. And all of a sudden the king's like, don't. And then unfortunately we see Harry Fairfax gets killed. There was something I missed I wanted to point out about Harry. Let's see if I can do it quick enough. I'll try to find it. Okay, guys. I just thought this was a funny scene. They're hanging out with Charles. That scene I showed you earlier. And Harry Fairfax farts. One of the king's flunkies says, "How dare you fart before the king?" And he says, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was his turn." Oh, that's rich. I can hear some of you groaning right now, but I thought it was funny. So then Charles comes back because it looks like the princess kind of like mind nudged him. And he's got a sword and he's all heroically like, "Attack! The valiant never taste death but once." And they just mow him down. So that's the end of the king. We see these tarot cards fluttering in between the panels. And then we see a little scene from the Bayeux Tapestry. Just all these random things. And because he's so concentrating on, the king getting killed, this could ruin their whole plan. He's not thinking, he's not paying attention, and one of Cromwell's guys takes him out. Look at this series of panels here. I love that kind of stuff. And we see Luther bleeding on the ground. The ground spins beneath him. The pulsing red light in his vision fades to black. He welcomes oblivion. We have a little pinup of Fairfax. Next issue. And that's it for now, guys. Tomorrow, or maybe tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, or the next day, I will show you 5 through 9 of this wonderful comic, The Adventures of Luther Arkwright by Bryan Talbot. I hope you guys enjoyed this first taste of it, and I hope you return to watch the second half. Technically, it's the second part of 4, because right after that, I'm going right into Heart of Empire. So I'm excited, guys, to read these again. It's been probably since 1990. I haven't read these again. Having a great time. I like how complicated they are. You really got to read these closely. So if you do get these, pay attention. It's well worth your time. Thanks, guys, for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.